My vacation week was here, but it didn't start the way I had hoped. After a decent Saturday evening at our local swingers party, we went out for dinner on Sunday. I must have eaten something bad, since the next 3 days I was either at the doctor's or in bed with a fever and various assortments of ailments. Finally, by Wednesday morning, I woke up still not up to 100%, but actually I felt much better. I asked my man if I could get away until Friday to continue my recuperation. He agreed that a place to relax might be just what I needed. I decided to rent a camping spot near the beach in Maine. I think it is not only the best beach around, but it also has just the right number of people to make it amusing for me. There was a gentleman I flirted with, from a website that I am on, that lived close to the beach. I began my adventure by telling him I was coming up to Maine. I made it up to the beach by noon on Wednesday and checked into the campsite. I asked for a secluded spot among the trees, but not too far from the bathrooms. I set up my tent in a beautiful area with good shade on a nice patch of soft ground. I sent a text message to. I took the trolley to the beach and set up my chair and blanket on the left side of the beach, where it was less crowded. This area of the beach also happened to have more French Canadians, who dressed better for the beach than most Americans. I lathered my body with lotion and laid out on the beach soaking in the sun. By 2 o'clock, there were people all around me, who were going in and out of the water. I noticed a couple just in front of the where I was sunbathing. Right away I could tell they were French Canadian since I didn't hear them say anything in English. I guessed that the woman was in her late 20s or early 30s. She had a little girl who looked to be about 4 years old with light brown hair. The little girl looked as adorable as her mother. Her husband had flowing black hair and a large almost hairless, pale-skinned muscular body. He was tall, very loud, and noticed me right away. They seemed to know many of the other couples around them, since all the kids played together. When I looked up from time to time, I could see all the families were doing beach games together. I chatted with my friend about our evening's plans. We were both laughing and sending each other pictures. The child wandered up to me and tried to hand me a bucket. As she approached and got close to me, her mom said something to her and looked over at me and smiled. I told her it was okay, however she only spoke French back to me. I said, "Sorry, I don't speak French, but I am French Canadian by birth." She tried to say hello and introduce herself and her daughter, but after a failure to communicate with me, she flagged over her husband. He listened to her, and then came toward me. He said in broken English that his wife Lily had initially thought that I was Canadian, and was just trying to say hello. He then continued to tell me that she liked my bathing suit, and that she had apologized for their daughter Emma, who could be quite loud. I laughed and told him I was a French Canadian decent, but I was American. I then introduced myself. We laughed and he told me his name was Nathan, and that they were staying the week at a hotel, with their extended family. I stayed at the beach until it was about 5. I continued to occasionally interact with my new Canadian friends and played with Emma in the water, so they seemed to trust me. He was handsome and she was very beautiful, but way out of his league. Everything about her was beautiful in a little hippie crunchy kind of way. As they packed up their things for the day, he gave me a cheek kiss and she gave me a hug and a bottle of water. As they left, I told them maybe we would see each other tomorrow. While I waited for the trolley, I sent a text message to my date for the evening. I had 90 minutes before I was to meet my date at the front of the campground. I got to my campsite and took a shower and I put on a sundress. I had the smell of suntan lotion and the warmth of the sun had given my body the much-needed rejuvenation from my prior bout of sickness at the beginning of the week. My hair looked great after a day in the sun and I was ready to meet my date for this evening. I had met Dan months ago on the website we both use. We had always talked about meeting, but I never thought that time would arise. He seemed cool. He was 52, divorced, with no kids, and he had a house, 1 town away from the beach. He was very into me, which is something that really me excited. I didn't have to wait long before he drove up in small BMW and beeped. I got in. He told me dinner and drinks would begin our evening, since he wanted to enjoy every moment he had with me. He reminded me however that after dinner, he was going to my brains loose. We went to a restaurant, ate, had some wine and got to know each other a little bit better. He said he wished I was single so he could be with me forever, and we both laughed. He was sweet and I told him he was being too sweet. This turned him into someone a little more forceful with his kisses. After dinner, we rushed to his place. When we burst in through the front door of his house he offered me a drink. I declined however and asked instead for some water. I then reminded him that I had just gotten over being sick earlier in the week. When I spotted the chair that I had watched him broadcast from, I laughed, pointed at the chair and yelled out, "Hey, that's the famous chair." He confessed it was, and I mentioned we should start there. I sat in it. He disrobed and turned the cam on for the website we are on. I told the world that was watching that I was cheating on my husband with this man. It didn't take long before Dan took over and told me what to do. He held my head as I looked into the cam. Can you guess what happens next? He asked me to stay as I drank some more water. I declined his offer however, saying no, and that I looked forward to my tent. We made some small talk as he drove me to my campsite. After he dropped me off, I used my phone's light and found my way back to my tent. I climbed in very happy. I woke up with the sun. As I rose up and left my tent, I noticed I had my first neighbors. A big camper with the truck that had bought it, was parked next to my campsite site. The owners were just starting to set up their camp. Going off to the showers, I just went by their campsite and paid them no attention. I took a nice long shower before heading off to the beach. I arrived at my spot on the beach and saw Nathan. He waved for me to come over, so I set up my chair next to theirs and began my day in the sun. Nathan and Lily had fun in the sun right beside me. They wore the same bathing suits and spoke French with each other as the day before. They occasionally would turn to me and would say something to me in broken English. We both got into the water together and I took hold of Lily's hand as we played in the waves. We ate lunch at the pier together and continued to chat. It was fun to listen to them chatter away in French. We went back to the beach and stayed there and chatted and watched Emma play in the sand. Around 4, I said I had to go to the public showers. Lily offered however that I could use their room shower, since they were wrapping up their day at the beach as well. Nathan asked if I would like to have some wine with them after we showered. I said yes, and we talked about where we should go for our drinks. I suggested he just buy a bottle from a store near the pier and that we have our drinks in their room. We hit up a restaurant at which I ordered and we split another bottle of wine. I was still in my bathing suit bottom with a pull-over skirt so I was uncomfortable. I soon said that I needed to return to my campground. After dinner, we traded Facebook pages, and said maybe we would see each other tomorrow. I got back to my campsite and saw that it was now much more crowded than it had been yesterday. I climbed into my tent. Just before dusk, I went to the bathroom. As I was walking by the campsite next to mine, someone called, "Hello neighbor." I returned the hello and my neighbor beckoned for me to come over to make our introductions. "I'm Steve and my friend John is in the camper drunk." I introduced myself and soon found out that we were both from Massachusetts. They had come up to Maine to get away and relax, just like I had. I also learned that they were leaving Friday evening same as I. They were heading north for fishing however, while I was heading south for home. Steve mentioned that he smelled what I had been smoking and offered to trade some scotch for what I had to share. I said, "That sounds great." About 30 minutes later, after I put on some shorts and a tank top and rolled a few joints, I was ready for my campfire powwow with my neighbors. Steve had started making s'mores as he sat near the flames of his campfire. I thought this was cute. He poured some Johnny Walker Black over some ice into a glass with a handle. I lit the first joint and John popped his head out of the tent but, after his first hit he coughed and vomited a little, after which he called it a night. Steve and I both laughed and settled in and began talking about our lives. He was shocked I had no kids and that my life brought me around to where I was today. Steve was a widower at 64 and worked in finance in Boston, and he lived in the western suburbs. He had both a good story and a good outlook on life. He could have passed for the Marlboro man with his looks, but was a little heavier set. As I ate my s'more I made a mess, and he told me it was all over my face. As I was quite drunk, I said that this was not the first time I had white stuff all over my face. He laughed and we clinked glasses a few times on landing funny ones as we talked. I lit up the second joint. It was quite dark with only the light of the fire glowing on our faces. He was such a gentleman and seemed too nice to seduce. It crossed my mind, however, to see what I could do. He asked about my relationships. As we talked, I didn't reveal too much at first. He asked why I didn't wear my ring. I said, I do wear my ring but only when I want to. He asked how my man felt about that. At first I yelled who cares and clinked glasses. I followed this up more seriously, with the truth and rules of engagement in my life. He found that my life was quite intriguing. We rambled on. I told him that I hated men younger than myself, that it was just not my thing, and why I preferred older men. He drank another round from his bottle. I said, wow, and on that note I am off to my tent. We clinked glasses one more time and he said, good night. He hugged me as he went into the camper and I went off to my tent. I was shocked that I wasn't sick and I passed out right away. The following morning I stayed in my tent for a while, which didn't seem long enough. I just wasn't getting up and I covered my head and did my best to stay asleep as long as I could. I heard people outside and the warmth of the sun made it hard for me to sleep any longer, but I just didn't want to get up. I heard my name a few times until finally I said, yes. Steve asked if I wanted iced coffee and I said, please. I thought I fell asleep again, and what felt like an hour later, Steve asked if he could enter my dome tent. I said, you may enter, my good neighbor. Steve unzipped my tent and entered, after which he re-zipped the entrance. He said, wow, nice place you got here. He handed me my coffee, which had more sugar in it than I'm used to, but it was what I needed. As I broke down my camp with his help, I told him about the website I'm on and gave him my email. I went to the beach for a half day and saw Nathan and Lily, who kissed me goodbye. At last, I called it a day at 5. As I drove home I felt great, so happy, so rested. My man had dinner ready when I go home. The next day we attended our favorite party in Providence and I let him have a few women. I then played with a guy I had played with before, so my man could have his wife, since I am always a good team player. Today is Sunday and I am going to relax at home. It was a good way to end my week. I contacted all my new friends to tell them how much I had enjoyed their company on my summer vacation.